Good evening and welcome to the Chorlton High School Parent Information Evening for Year 10 for the summer term. This evening we're going to be talking about some information that specifically relates to our Year 10 students as they move through their summer term and start to think about being prepared for the beginning of next year, which is their Year 11 and their Year 11 journey with us at Chorlton High School. In terms of introductions, we continue to be mostly the same team that have worked with students all year. You'll be very familiar with Miss Irwin, who's worked with students since Year 7, as well as Miss Sarwar and myself, who've been working with the year group all year. And for the summer term and for the spring term, Mr. Dawson's been working with us as one of our deputy head teachers at Chorlton High School. Mr. Rochford continues to be a learning mentor for a lot of our students in Key Stage 4, so working with our students to provide one-to-one support and tuition where needed. That supports a lot of our pastoral care systems as well as helping them engage a little bit more sometimes with their academic curriculum. Before I get started this evening, what I will say is that we are continuing to be incredibly proud of them as a year group. They are going from strength to strength. If we think about how they started the year to where they are now, they've just come on leaps and bounds, and they've really taken a mature and measured approach to what GCSEs are for them. They are brilliant students. They work really hard in lessons, and as much as we can do, we celebrate their successes in school because we want them to feel validated that they're doing the right thing as much as possible. In terms of what we're going to cover this evening, we're going to just start with a very brief overview of GL assessments. GL assessments is just about responding to some inquiries that we've had in school, just to share that information with yourselves in case that's language that you've heard from your child if they're in year 10, or maybe from other students in different year groups. We're also going to be looking at the summer progress tests and exam routines that we're going to be going through over the next few weeks with students. We'll be looking at some specific summer events for Year 10 and the Year 11 college application process and what that looks like as we move into that Year 11 phase and getting them ready for next year. If we start with GL assessments isn't something that's new to us this year. It's something that we've been doing for a number of years at Chorlton High School. GL assessments are typically taken in English, Maths and Science. It's not something that we typically expect students to revise or prepare for. It's not something that comes with a revision list. It's not something that's there to catch them out, but it's something that is externally set by external bodies, and not always will it match the taught curriculum that we've planned and designed at Chorlton High School. What we do use them for is to look at making sure that our curriculum is performing as it needs to, making sure that the curriculum can be developed if it needs to be developed in some areas. It gives us an indication of where some students might need some additional support in class. But the reason we do not share the results of these is because typically the results, when the data sets come back into school, they can be quite complicated sets of data. Sometimes they could be seen as demotivating because they're based on national comparisons where we're compared to lots of other different centres, and they're quite detailed and quite thorough. When we report data and information home, we try and keep that as clear, the information that we're sending, as possible, because that's probably the best way of measuring a student's performance and progress for us as a school at that time, so that we can continue to make that progress over a further period or into the next assessment window. It might be something that we decide to share in the future. However, what we will be doing for now is keeping those data sets in school and holding those on to ourselves and using that to help us with our curriculum design and stuff like that moving forward. Moving on from GL assessments, actually one of the big things that we've focused on with students since the last week before we broke up for Easter is getting them to start thinking about being ready for Year 11. Now, we're not telling them that they are Year 11 students just yet, but it's that preparedness, being ready for what the next 12 months will look like. At this point now, Year 11 have started their GCSEs. They are 12 months away from their own exams, and for some subjects, their coursework has begun, Some coursework subjects have been completed for a part of their piece of coursework, and that work sent off to the exam boards. So at this point, they're really starting to gain that traction for the next 12 months, where they're going to be going through those assessment systems and routines as part of their GCSEs. So we've tried to show them visually what that looks like. So in the summer term for students, they start the summer term now, they've got their exams on the horizon, but that's really the starting point that leads them then into their college visits before we break up for the summer of this year. We'll talk about college visits a little bit later on, but the idea with the college visits is a taster session, an opportunity for them to look at different colleges in and around Manchester, some of the most successful, popular colleges, so they can get a flavour for what those feel like, so they can prepare their applications at the start of year 11. In year 11, they will have their first big mock exam window in November. That will be then shortly followed by their applications for college. So they apply for colleges, and we'll talk about that a bit further on in the presentation as well. And then they'll really start to then get some information trickling through about interviews and start to think about whether or not they want to accept places at different colleges. In March, just after the half term, they will then have another assessment opportunity, which is their March mocks. They will do those as the last big exam opportunity before they do their GCSEs in the summer. And then this time next year, they will be doing their GCSE exams, many of which might have already started. So speaking exams for languages, for example, vocational exams will have taken place, big pieces of coursework will have taken place, art exams, food practical exams, all of those sorts of things will have already happened, but the big terminal final exams that they will take for their GCSE grades will be completed in 12 months' time. So really it's all about getting them ready for the next 12 months and starting with a little bit of a step up in the summer term, so that when they come back in September, it's not too overwhelming for them. They don't feel daunted by the prospect. They've already had a bit of a flavour for it. What I will say is, alongside all of this, we are very, very mindful about students' well-being and making sure that we're monitoring how they're performing, but also how they're feeling, and making sure that we're addressing any issues as they arise. We know that assessments can be quite stressful for some students, so again, making sure that we link our well-being messages and keep giving constant reminders about what well-being should look like around exams to help support them through the processes, alongside being familiar faces and checking in with lots of our students at breaks, at lunches, before school, after school, etc., just to make sure that they're comfortable and confident going through those exam periods. Obviously, assessment's always linked to our home learning policy and our home learning strategy. Now, we have always had 3 parts to home learning at Chorlton High School. So far, lots of our students will have been doing home learning, which is set by a class teacher. Typically, it's set through Microsoft Teams. It's something where students will complete a task. They might have to do some extended research or revision for a topic that's coming up in class. They might be reading articles, which helps to develop knowledge a little bit further. Again, these are typically assignments through Microsoft Teams set by class teachers, usually to be completed in the space of a week or maybe a couple of weeks, depending on what type of activity it is and what subject it's being set by. We're at the point now where we're looking at home study. So this is really the step up from home learning, where we are going into that window of preparing for exams and assessments. So at this point, it's opportunities for students to reflect, start thinking about any gaps they have in their learning, and start to think about preparing for those exams by doing some study techniques that are going to help develop their knowledge a little bit further, but also making sure that they're ready for things like NEAs and coursework. One of the subjects I teach in school is design and technology. So after the half-term break, as we start summer 2, their NEA for design and technology will begin. So it's not always just about preparing for the exam, but also it's that study, that routine that helps them with other aspects of their assessments as well, including things like coursework. Typically, home study takes place in the second part of each term as we go into those assessments or exam windows. And then obviously what we also want students to think about and focus on is their wider reading, giving them an opportunity to maybe read text that link to the curriculum. It could be reading for pleasure, so making sure that they've had an opportunity to try and develop their vocabulary and their understanding of literacy and text. Alongside that, that will then hopefully form some of their thoughts and opinions and analysis and evaluation techniques that they can apply in class and in exams as well. This summer, our progress test cycle looks as follows. So we've already gone through a progress test cycle earlier in the year. They were their Year 10 spring exams. They did them just after the half-term break when they came back, sorry, just before the half-term break, before they went on the work experience placements. They have similarly got a 2-week progress test cycle, which is happening in the summer 2 term. Now for Year 10, this looks a little bit different to Year 7, 8 and 9 because we want them to have a flavour for what exams feel like. Again, part of preparation for Year 11 is giving them an opportunity to experience sitting assessments in the exam hall. So again, when they go into that exam hall in Year 11, they've seen it before, it's not something that's too daunting, they're quite familiar with it. Their assessments will take place between Monday the 16th of June and Friday the 27th of June this year. And there is a caveat to that in that some assessments will take place just before, depending on what subject. But when I show you the exam timetable, I can explain what that means in a little bit more detail for you. Like I've said, there are going to be exams taken in the sports hall, the exam hall. They will follow a specific timetable for these exams as well in Year 10. They will not follow their regular timetable for the full 2 weeks. When they're not in an exam, we would expect them to be in lessons, but there will be times when they go to the sports hall to complete an assessment, which might be slightly different to what their regular timetable looks like. What we'll also be sharing with students, we've shared this already once in assembly last week, we will continue to share this information with them. Again, this is just sometimes what we call over communication, so oversharing messages just to make sure that the routines are ready for students when the exams take place, which is essentially exam etiquette. A lot of these posters aren't things that we've designed as a school. These will be designed externally and shown across all exam centres. These are typically things that are displayed, and we have displayed in and around exam rooms. It includes messaging about things like no mobile phones, no smartwatches, no technology or web-enabled devices that could lead to, in Year 11, the possibility of a disqualification if it's been used in the wrong way. So by getting, again, the routine established now in Year 10, students are then ready for Year 11 and what that routine needs to look like. We also explain to students some of the other routines as well about how they should conduct themselves when they're in the exam hall. So making sure that they follow instructions given by an invigilator, because it won't just be their class teachers in the room, but also making sure that they follow the routines of sitting in the correct seat, which will be displayed for them and they can check in advance. Again, we share this with students just for familiarity at this point, getting them used to what this routine needs to look like. But what all students must remember during that exam period is making sure that they've got full correct uniform and that they are punctual for those assessments. Those assessments will take place, and if students are late, they are going to miss the start of those assessments. If they are late by a prolonged period of time, their assessment will not take place. They'll be asked to go back to their normal lesson, and they will have to either sit that at another opportunity, or they will get a grade which reflects the fact that they've not sat that assessment at that time. Obviously, we are accommodating if a student is absent, maybe they've been sick from school that day, we can accommodate that and we can talk that through. But again, in Year 11, they need to be there punctual on time because we have registered with exam boards what time exams will take place. Students are expected to check their seat numbers before the exams take place. They will be displayed in the dining room in 2 different locations, and we continue to share that with students so they know where they should be sat in the exam, and we make sure that they are aware that at times there might be other areas of the school that are being used, not just the sports hall. So sometimes we do exams in the green room, but we'll indicate that on the seating list so students are familiar with it. We would expect students, like in year 11, to come ready and prepared with the correct equipment. So ideally, in a see-through pencil case, they should have 2 black pens, a pencil, a ruler, a highlighter, and a calculator. Now, a calculator can be used for maths, science, geography, business, DT, lots of different subjects, unless it specifically says that it is a non-calculator paper. So for some of the maths exams, they are non-calculator papers, and so they won't be able to use that calculator in that assessment. We don't routinely do toilet breaks for students. If they've got a toilet pass, we obviously make sure that we're honouring that because that's sometimes linked to medical conditions. However, we also need to make sure that students are aware that there are some students who are entitled to additional time who will be sat slightly to one side of the sports hall, just so that when we complete the assessment for everybody else, they're able to continue working without the distractions of people getting up and leaving the exam or sports hall. We encourage students also, and they will need to in year 11, to make sure that they've got a water bottle, that it is see-through, and again, any labels that are on there have been removed. In part, this is just coming back to that messaging about exams and what exam routines will look like in year 11. It's not meant to be overwhelming at this point, but it's just trying to give them the skills and the techniques that they need to have independently when they go through those exam windows in year 11 in November and in March and then next summer. For students this year, we have an exam timetable which is being shown to you here. Now, the areas that are in dark blue, you'll see art and photography. Those are exams that will take place in students' normal lessons. Because of the length of those exams, they will take place during their curriculum time in specific studios where they've got access to the equipment that they will have in year 11. So in an art studio, close to all of the equipment that they're going to need to complete that assessment there. Equally, with photography students, part of that exam might include the use of a computer, using something like Photoshop, for example. You'll notice that those exams run over a slightly longer period. So actually, they're given a 3-hour block for those exams in art and in photography. In year 11, those exams will typically be a 10-hour assessment. So we would schedule those to last over 2 full school days. But given that this is a year 10 exam, that time has been slightly condensed just for this summer. Like we've said to students, all exams will take place in the sports hall unless otherwise stated, but there might be at times a slight change to the school day for them. We'll always make sure this is communicated daily as the change is happening, so that students are familiar if they need to take a different lunch or a different break as required to make sure that exams fit into this timetable and this schedule. What's really important, again, is that if students are not in an exam, so for example, if there is a geography exam taking place and they are not a geography student, it's important that they go to their normal lessons. Their class teachers will be there, their lessons will continue as normal, they'll be expected to be on time and registered so that they're ready for their next assessment or they're ready for the next topic that teachers will be moving on to. But the timetable has been published and will be published further to students. Students will have a physical copy. They'll have 2 physical copies even. Students will also see a copy of this on the website. This is also on Microsoft Teams in their Year 10 team page. It is also available for them in their home study site, which I'll talk about shortly. The exam timetable should really be followed as displayed on the screen here. What we've said to students is that actually what they need to do is start by looking at what exams are taking place on what day. Once they've looked at that information, the next thing is to check the subject. So as I've mentioned, if there's a geography exam on, if they do geography, they will be going for that exam at that time, even if that's not when their regular geography lesson is. We also recommend that students look at the length and the duration of exams. Now these differ, so whilst the geography exam is 1 hour, a music exam might be an hour and a half, or will be an hour and a half in this case. RE 1 hour 45, business 1 hour 45. So it's important that they look at the times so that they can regularly be familiar with how long they've got in that exam. So as well as the times being displayed for them in the start time and the end time, they're familiar with how to pace themselves, understand what's expected in the time that that exam is taking place. Other things for them to note as well is the notes section as well at the end of that timetable. So it gives them a bit more information about anything like a change to lunch or a change to break that's taking place on that day. So for example, on Monday the 16th, anybody who does GCSE PE will be taking the early lunch rather than their normal late lunch. That means that the exam can take place and they will still finish school on time that day. So we don't have to worry about them running over too much, and they can still leave as they would normally do at 2:45. Doesn't impact many students this year, but sometimes there are sessions where there's more than one subject taking place at a time. So the example here is food, DT and health and social care. Now, this year we're quite fortunate that there aren't any students that have a clash. There's no students that do food and health and social care or food and DT, for example. If there is a timetable where there are multiple subjects, students will typically sit the exam that is listed at the top of the block. So if students did do food and DT, in this instance, they would take the food exam because that's the one that's listed first on their timetable. Again, all of this has been shared and communicated, and we'll continue to remind students of this over the coming weeks. But this timetable has been shared in multiple different locations so that students have got opportunities to understand what is taking place and when it will take place. So as much as we talk to students about exams that are taking place, what's also important for us to do is to talk about the support that they've got available to them. So with students, what we want them to think about is making sure that they can create a study timetable where they're given time and opportunities to practice and prepare, which I'll be talking about just now. What we've also done this year is made sure that our website is populated with lots of extra information that can help support students, but also support parents in supporting students for exams and assessments. So on our school website, if you use the parents drop down, what you'll notice now we've got individual year group hubs. So for students in year 10, for example, you would click on parents, drop down to the year 10 info hub, and you'll find all things relevant to that year group. This just makes communication and information finding a little bit easier on our school website. It also means that we can share specific information at relevant times as well. Within the individual hubs, you will then find things that might be really useful for you as a parent, which can include things like term dates, uniform policies. It could be information about extracurricular, home learning, progress tests and stuff like that. So in there you will find, specifically in the progress test support, ranges of different videos that can be used to try and make sure that students are prepared for exams and assessments. In additionality to that, what we've also got for students, which will be shared on that website, is information about what is taking place on all of the exams that are on their exam timetable. So we've given them a breakdown of topics to prepare for each exams. Now that really is a good indicator for students then of what will be assessed in each of the assessments that are taking place. So for example here, when you've got the subject of food, actually there is a list of their 7-8 different topics that students should be really familiar with to prepare for that exam. What we realise is that actually there's a lot of information there potentially. So we've encouraged students to start breaking that down into topics that they know, they're comfortable with, they're confident with, and areas where they think they need to go and focus that study time and that preparing for exam time at home. Alongside that, there are keywords that they can start to then recognize and identify that link to a topic, or maybe terminology that they need to go and understand a little bit better. So if we were thinking about here environmental impact of food, well, the terms that link to that would be things like food mileage or carbon footprint or food waste. So as well as looking at my exercise book for environmental impact of food, or looking at my revision guide, or going on to GCSE pod, I can understand through my glossary some of the terminology that I need to go back and look at, just to make sure that it is really embedded into my learning. So what's really important is that students recognise that they don't necessarily need to go back and learn everything on those lists. Those are the topics that we've covered in classrooms across the school year. They will have covered these in class as part of their curriculum, but also because these are the areas that they will be assessed on, it's important that we highlight that and make sure that they can be confident that they know what those assessments will look like in terms of topics and information. Again, getting students to focus on key areas of learning is going to be really important. Not just key areas of learning, but also understanding key terminology. Vocabulary, if they're familiar with it, will then be something that supports them through their exam questioning. So when they read an exam question, they can understand the nuances of what that question looks like, so they should be able to answer that a lot more confidently. All of our students are encouraged to keep a glossary. Those glossaries are in their exercise books at the back, so that's where they can go back and look at their key terminology and start to think about finding keywords that we've covered in class, so they can go back and review that alongside their other study habits. Now at this point, they've got 4 school weeks before their exams, so there's plenty of opportunity for them to start thinking about breaking those topics down across their different subjects. But what we've also said to students all year is how much time they should be spending each week focusing on study, and what home learning time should be allocated each week or each fortnight. So when we've broken that down into a range of different hours, if I inflate that figure slightly, given that we're going into a year 10 exam, realistically we're talking about 8 hours a week of study time and preparing for exams. Now, when I mentioned this to students in assembly, that seemed quite a lot, but actually when you break it down into study blocks, it's not as much time as students initially start to think. So we're going to be using form time this week to help them think about what does their study time look like at home. So they will have a study planner that looks a little bit like this, where we want them to start to think realistically about how they're going to break down their study time each week. We want them to understand that their study time should include opportunities for well-being. So blocking off times when they know that they're not going to study, blocking off times when they're going to have an opportunity for rest, if they've got other commitments, if they've got family plans and family commitments, that they're spending that time not focusing on study, but having that time for those well-being opportunities. Equally so, it's important that they do that, because there's no point saying I'm going to study something and then feeling disappointed because they've not done it because they've got a football practice. So by starting to block that in first, they know then what sort of time is left and is available for them for exams. What we then want them to start to think about is actually what subjects are going to be studied and when. Not necessarily just what subjects, but actually breaking down from that list of topics, what are they going to study at that time. So on a Tuesday, in their first study block, for example, they might choose to study GCSE business. So rather than just say business, they could actually say, actually, I'm going to look at globalization as a topic from within business, because actually I've got a clear focus plan for what I'm going to study in that 45-minute study session. What we've also got is opportunities for them to come and get additional support in school if they need it. So they can block that onto their planner. So on Tuesday, there is a homework club which runs after school. And for the next 4 weeks, on Thursday after school, there is another homework club which will be run by myself, so Miss Irwin on a Tuesday and myself on a Thursday, where they can come to F13. And if they just want to have a quiet space, if they want to come to a space and get some tips from staff, so I will be there to support them on different study habits, or they might just need somebody just to kind of support them through where to find bits of information. Or it could even be to reset a password or a log on for a specific online learning platform. What we've also said to students as well is that it's really important that they find time not just to study, but to practice. So one of the things that is going to make them really successful next year is not just going back and learning topics or studying specific topics. So if they're studying geography and they look at global hazards, at some point later in the week, maybe on a Sunday, they might have a 45-minute study session where rather than going back and studying global hazards again, they focus on practicing questions that link to global hazards. So they've had an opportunity to test what they know and think about whether or not that learning has been successful. So using opportunities at different points in the week where they can practice, go on to Sparks and practice some maths questions, or maybe they practice their essay structure for English. It could be that they go and get a past paper and they practice a past paper at home to try and see if they can support their exam technique. Those opportunities are what's going to make the difference between having knowledge and not being able to apply it, or being knowledgeable and applying it in order to secure quite strong grades next year. So we'll support students with that this week in Form Time. So each week they'll have, hopefully, a planner that will let them start to think about what they're going to be doing independently at home and where they're going to do that, if it's in school in a homework club or if it's at home as part of one of their study sessions. Now, on top of that and the support that we give in school, there's lots of other opportunities for support that is available to students as well. Students' form tutors are amazing in Year 10. We've got a brilliant year team. We've got lots of amazing teachers at Chorlton High School, as you will be familiar. But beyond that, there is additional levels of support that we can offer students when it comes to preparing for exams or to support them with home learning. One of those is to look at the home learning section on our school website. We've got there not just information now about exams and progress tests, but there are term by term home learning plans, what is being set each week for students to complete. These are typically going to be the things that are set on Teams, like I mentioned earlier, but they might be an assignment that links to another platform. So that could be Educate for English, Science or Computing. It could be Seneca for humanities subjects like history or geography. It could be Sparks for maths, or it could be to develop vocab using Quizlet in Spanish and French. What we've tried to do all the time is keep log-on information as synchronized as possible. For the vast majority of our online learning platforms, students have got opportunities to sign in using their Office email address. So that's the email address they use to get onto Teams, will be the same log-on for lots of platforms, including Seneca and GCSE Pod. What we've also got with some of our platforms as well is what we call single sign-on. Now, single sign-on is something that is being created to help students log on with just the same password and username that they've used for things like Microsoft Teams. I'll show you what that looks like in just a moment. But equally so, we've got then our home study site. So again, on our school website, if students go to the students section and click on home study support, that will take them to their home study site, which has got information linked to all of those different platforms that I've just mentioned. It's got lots of information, including videos, which shows them how to do things like mind maps or using other study habits like making a revision card. It's got information about progress tests and exams. It's got lots of different resources that will support students at this point. Now, at this time, this is student access only because of students having to be logged into Office. Hopefully at some point we can look at how we can open that up to parents as well. But for now, it might be that you want to sit with your child and see what that looks like with them, so that they've got that familiarity with what that page looks like. That's something that we developed and started last year that we've continued to build on year. So there's lots of resources constantly being added in there, as well as finding things like video clips. You will find knowledge organisers. There will also be things like past papers. Again, for lots of our online platforms, like I mentioned earlier, there is single sign-on. So where there is a tab or a button that says sign in with Microsoft, if students use that button and they're already logged into Office or to Teams, that should sign them straight in, so that actually they don't need to worry about remembering a username and password. Specifically, things like Sparks is good for that, as well as Seneca and GCSE Pod. However, at any point, if they've forgotten a username or they've forgotten a password, they can ask their class teacher, who can then get that reset for them. So they can reset the password so that they can then log in and access it at home without any complications or too much time delay. If we now look ahead to what year 11 is going to look like, so obviously I've mentioned exams and preparedness for exams and assessments in year 11. Other things that we're going to be considering and thinking about really is that transition and that journey now to Key Stage 5. So we'll be thinking about the college application process, specifically as we start year 11. So college applications don't just happen at the end of November. College applications, we start that process early in September with things like a personal statement. So college applications, whilst they start quite early, will be hinted at the end of year 10 through things like college visits and college taster days. What we also do in the autumn term of year 11 is we invite colleges into school where they can talk to students about what life is like at those colleges, what courses are offered, but also what their application route might look like. It also explains to students quite clearly what grades are required for certain colleges. In Manchester, we're fortunate to have some astounding colleges on our doorstep, but the grade requirements for some of those courses are quite high. So we explain that so students have then got some aspirational messages about how to be as successful as possible to secure a place on that college course. As well as the colleges coming in through assemblies, and that will be weekly from lots of different colleges, not just Severian and Loreto, but Manchester College, Salford College, Trafford College. We also will continue to have our post-16 evening. Now with the post-16 evening, many of our year 10 students actually attended that evening this year in year 10. The event will run again for students in year 11. So if they missed it in year 10, they can come in year 11. If they came in year 10 and want to get some additional information now they're going into year 11, they've got the opportunity to do that. What will be shared at that time is further information about the colleges, further to what's been discussed with them in their assemblies, but at that point there will be some specific dates which relate to open days and open events for the colleges. Now we're always going to encourage students to go to an open day because it gives them an opportunity to think about their route to college, whether it's something that's handy for them. It will also be an opportunity for them to think about whether or not the sessions that they're getting little tasters in are the most appropriate courses for them to apply for A-level or for level 3 vocationals. As well as the post-16 evening being about the colleges, that's also an opportunity again for yourselves to ask questions to us. It could be, like I said, that you came in year 10 but you've got some further questions. Well, staff will be on hand, our careers team will be on hand and available to talk students and support you as parents and guardians through that process. The college application process also continues through November. We always encourage students to apply for a minimum of 3 different colleges. All their applications will be completed through paper applications. Some colleges accept electronic applications, but what we typically will do as a school is we will then get those applications together and we as a school take responsibility for checking them and dispatching the applications forms by taking them ourselves to the college in a bundle so that all of our students' applications can be processed and tracked. That helps really for us to be able to then understand where students are getting interviews, timelines for interviews, but also supporting students through that year 11 application process. When their interviews have come back, if they've been offered a place, what should they next do, or what should their route forward be at that point? We also explain and talk about apprenticeships. Apprenticeships are explained through workshops provided to the students that are interested in that. And alongside all of that, we then use respect lessons in year 11, which become life skills lessons to think about looking at areas like labour market information and possible future job prospects. References are written by their form tutor, as well as the year 10 team currently, who will be the year 11 team next year. And we support every application that we send to college with a reference from school. So as much as we will share their information about how they're performing and their effort data, we will also be sharing references and some lovely comments about how wonderful they are to try and help secure those college places. So the whole process around colleges and applications is one that is quite well supported by us as a school, but equally so, if there are questions at any point as you're moving through year 11 with our students that you want to come and address, please bring it up and we can talk that through. That could be, again, a very specific question about an apprenticeship or a type of apprenticeship, or about one college versus another, or one qualification versus another. So as we draw this session to a bit of a close at this point, just a few key dates and reminders from what I've talked about so far. Monday the 16th to Friday the 27th of June, as we've mentioned, we have our year 10 exams in the sports hall. Students will be following a timetable, and in the sports hall we will take registers so their attendance isn't impacted. Results will be shared with students during their feedback lessons, which will be the following 2 weeks after exams. And then, as usual, we will send home a snapshot of data about students where we look at their efforts and their current progress before the summer break. We also have, as always, the week beginning the 30th of June and the week beginning the 7th of June, we have college taster days available. So we've liaised with Xaverian and Loreto, like many other colleges, like many other schools, and we've also liaised with Manchester College. Most students will get an opportunity to go and visit 2 colleges during the summer 2 term. The majority of students will go to Loreto and Xaverian. Some might go to maybe Loreto and Manchester College. What we will do is we'll look at what students have got a bit of a flavour for, what types of courses they want to go and experience, and make sure that they are on the most appropriate visit. On those visits, students will get an opportunity to have a little mini lesson. Maybe if they're going to look at A-level business, they might get a business taster session. So currently students are indicating from the list that is available what types of taster sessions they want. Remembering that these might be courses that are unfamiliar to them. So philosophy, we don't offer it as a GCSE, but it's something that is offered as an A-level course. So they might want to go and experience that, or law, for example. Sociology is usually very popular as well. The last week of the school year, week beginning the 14th of July, is ELI. ELI for year 10 is quite different to Key Stage 3. There will be some trips and visits that take place for some students, depending on the courses that they're on. So our staff are currently looking at planning those and making sure that they've got those enrichment opportunities ready for them so that they can have them to hand for when they're in year 11. We've also managed to get Loreto College to come in on those few days of ELI, and they're going to do some workshops and lessons with our students. Great opportunity for the students to be familiar with their tutors or potential future tutors from Loreto, as well as getting some learning around new topics that they're not familiar with. In some subjects, they will do some specific coursework sessions where they get to look at developing coursework a bit further. Getting some one-to-one guidance from their teachers, for example, will be an opportunity for them during ELI, as well as looking at areas like careers and IDEA. Obviously, at that point, we break up for summer. The students will have a normal summer break for them, and then we will return to school on the 3rd of September. All of the information about reopening will be shared with you in the summer as normal, but at that point, we are then fixed on our Year 11 mindsets, really optimistic and looking forward to getting them some really, really encouraging grades when they set their GCSEs at the end of their Year 11. Going back to like I did at the start, obviously we've got our year team, so if there's any questions at any point and you need to reach out to any of us, please do so. We will try our best to answer as many questions that you have. Remember, like I said at the start, they are an amazing group of students in Year 10. We are really, really proud of them and what they've achieved so far. We know that they're going to have an amazing summer term and do really well with their exams and assessments. And please remember that we are not just looking after their academic curriculum and making sure that they're successful in assessments. We will obviously support them through this, looking after them in terms of their well-being and making sure that we're keeping an eye on them so that they are not just prepared for assessment, but they are being looked after in terms of their balance around their personal well-being. Thank you very much. Enjoy the rest of your evening.